Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Margaret. I am a historical costumer and textile conservator in training, and today we will be examining this early 1830s bodice. Now the 1830s were an interesting time in fashion. This is when we're getting out of the Regency period and starting towards the Victorian period. Oftentimes it's called the Romantic period. This bodice has a high waistline and a very voluminous sleeve, which is hallmarks of the early 1830s. This dress probably dates from around 1830 to 1833. I have found a couple comparables, which I will show on screen. The really interesting thing about this dress for me is the level of degradation that we are seeing. It's a cotton dress, and normally cotton pieces are in pretty good condition. However, this is not in good condition. So I will first discuss the sort of design aspects of this dress, the construction aspects, and then get into the degradation of the cotton, what may have caused it, and how we may remedy this situation. So to start off, this bodice, as you can see, is missing an entire sleeve. This is really not an issue for me. This is a study piece for me. So as long as we have one sleeve, it's gonna work out. But this does give us an opportunity to look at the sleeve head more. So as you can see, this is a very, very high-waisted bodice. Now obviously the Regency era was known for being extremely high-waisted, the empire waistline, and the waistlines didn't decrease immediately. It was a slow transition from about 1820 to 1840 where the waistlines slowly come down. So this is probably pretty early as the waistline is very, very short. This bodice is very beautiful. It's done in this sort of printed cotton, this little floral printed cotton, which is showing up now as a dark brown, but we'll get into that later. All of the seams are exquisitely piped. The side seams, the front side seams, the binding is piped, the sleeve head is piped. This dress is constructed in the front. We have this sort of V shape with a ruching panel inside. Let's flip it around. I'm going to do this very carefully because this bodice is so damn fragile. All right. Use all of my handling skills. Okay. Literally flakes. Okay. So I'm going to open this up. So as you can see inside this bodice is entirely hand sewn. We have two bones at the side. These are probably baleen, although I can't really tell at this point without opening it up for sure. But they do feel like baleen. You can see that the basting stitches that were holding this together originally, probably for fitting purposes, are still very much inside this bodice. The seams are sewn with just a running stitch, kind of a pretty tight running stitch, and then sewn again with a bit of a back stitch to sort of hold the raw edges in place at points. On the back, as you can see, there is this false seam. This is also something you see a lot in the 1860s, but this seam actually goes through to the back, and you can just see the running stitches on the other side, so it is a false seam. Also on the back here, we have this beautiful line of piecing. What I really love about this dress, really cool feature of this dress, is these beautiful hook and eyes. I love hook and eyes, and I have to say that there's something not a lot of people talk about. Hook and eyes are often overlooked. A lot of people collect and talk about buttons, but I'm actually collecting some research on hook and eyes and hope to put out a video sort of helping date hook and eyes. But from my research, it seems that the mechanization of the hook and eye in England happened around the turn of the century, 18th to 19th century, just kind of when everything was being mechanized. But they weren't really sort of, that technology wasn't adopted in America until the mid-1830s. So it's very possible that these are handmade hook and eyes. It's also possible that they're machine made. So I'm not going to pass judgment on that because I really don't have the wherewithal to date these. However, I will say in the mid-19th century, we tend to see hook and eyes that are flattened on the top, and these are not. These are completely just wire. We also have this like weird steel one going on. So obviously, we're just kind of piecing things together. I also want to kind of point out this beautiful bias trim along the top and just how the beautiful little whip stitches inside. So now moving on to the sleeve, the main event in this period. 1830 sleeves are wild. That's what this era is known for. You know, in the 1820s, we're sort of seeing the growth of the puff sleeve, and by the 1830s, by 1830 really, it's grown to just massive proportions. It's the first time we see the gigot sleeve really happen in fashion. The next time would be the 1890s, and then after that, the 1980s. So this sleeve is spectacular. As you can see, it's not in very good condition, but it's completely piped. Again, the center seam is piped as well, and the cuff is completely piped. The cuff did at one point have hook and eyes. It no longer has its hook and eyes, but it does still have its crochet thread loops. So this bodice has beautiful, beautiful gathering, sort of cartridge pleat. I don't know really know what you would call that, but gathering with this thick thread on both the top of the sleeve head and the bottom. On the top of the sleeve head, it's gathered 5 times, the first one into the arm's eye, and then 4 times after that. And on the bottom, it is only gathered 4 times, 1 into the cuff, and then 3 after that. So this is a really cool, sort of interesting detail. You know, it's a hallmark of the period, is this sort of gathering to then big poof. And it's really awesome to see. It's really awesome to see how they did it, because I don't often study this period in extant garments because there just aren't a lot of them around. And being someone who has dealt with a lot of extant garments, I've dealt with a lot of late Victorian, early Edwardian garments, and I haven't really seen a lot of 1830s. I mean, anything before 1860, I really haven't dealt with. So this is awesome to see, and it's awesome to see how they did this. The sleeve is only partially lined. So it's lined in this same kind of cotton or linen, just plain woven fabric up until the point where we get the full balloon going on, and then it's also lined in the same cotton at the cuff. The sleeve head, again, is just put in with those running stitches. There may have been whip stitches at one point holding this together, but they're no longer. And you can see those beautiful dense gathers at the top of the sleeve head there. So those are some beautiful features of this bodice. All in all, it is a very beautifully constructed hand-sewn garment, and there's a lot of information here that I will take into my costuming. However, as a conservator, this garment really, really stresses me out. And that is because it is in an advanced stage of degradation. It is very, very fragile. I'm glad that I got this garment off of eBay and not another person, because I do have the wherewithal and the skills to be able to extend the life of this garment. I don't know, maybe 10, 20 years. Like, she's on her last legs. So I just want to talk about sort of how this may have came about and what's actually happening. So the lining of this garment is actually very strong and very stable. It doesn't have any issues. Versus the kind of outer cotton layer is shredding apart. This is very, you can see this on the sleeve in sort of dramatic proportions for 2 reasons. 1, it's unlined, obviously doesn't have that strong backing. And 2, it's just not supported. So it just has cracks and folds that sort of amplify what's going on here. The other clue to what's going on here is inside the sleeve cuff, we can see that the cotton fabric is much, much lighter. So this to me indicates that this cotton fabric has been producing acidic degradation byproducts that have darkened up the fabric. Now, what does that mean? So cellulose breaks down in a couple of different ways, but the one we're going to talk about is photooxidative degradation. What is photooxidative degradation, you may say? Well, it is when UV rays excite the oxygen atoms in the air to create free radicals. These free radicals then attack the links between the cellulose chains, breaking them apart. This can cause byproducts that are acidic, which can then, speed up the reaction more. And it just creates havoc. The more scissions you have in a cellulose chain, the weaker the cellulose chain is going to be overall, and eventually you get into the macro where you're starting to see tears, rips, and friability. So there are a few reasons why photooxidative degradation may be sped up. It's always going to be happening. There are beautifully intact gowns made of cotton from this period and earlier that are in stunning condition. I've seen them in museum collections. This, however, is not in good condition. And that might be because of three main factors. First of all, this may have been displayed at very high light levels. That light could be sunlight. Sunlight is highly destructive because it does have a lot of the UV spectrum in it. It has all of the UV spectrum in it. It could be indoor lighting. That still has harmful effects to garments. This garment could have been in an environment that was very hot. Heat also increases the reactivity of this degradation. And also, it could have been kept at very high humidity. Moisture in the air, high moisture content, can wreak havoc on garments and can speed up this degradation process. So, this dress, first of all, is shattering to pieces, but also you can see very closely little specks of cotton that are just flaking off of this. So, what is my plan for this garment? First of all, it is going to be kept in an acid-free box with some little bit of padding in it just to kind of hold out the shape and make sure we're not getting any hard creases in it. And then, honestly, I would be open to treating this garment. As a textile conservator in training, I'm in grad school right now, I don't know what I'd want to do with this because it is such an advanced state of decomp or degradation. I mean, it is technically decomposing, but the bodice itself, the actual bodice part, not the sleeve, potentially could have some type of overlay put onto it or some type of underlay patches, but I don't know how well the surface fabric would take to sewing. But since the lining is very strong and stable, that could be an option. For the sleeve, possibly lining it. I don't know. The sleeve's really bad. The sleeve is really bad. And then potentially doing some type of wet cleaning to remove the acidic degradation byproducts so that the degradation is slowed down. I don't know if this bodice could survive that though. So that's definitely something I'll be thinking about in the future because the fact of the matter is all objects have lifespans and this one is in a late stage of that lifespan. And you know, the job as a conservator is to increase that lifespan. And I do want to have this in my collection for a while because it is such a unique piece. It is such a rare piece. And I'm glad to have it in my collection because I do want to do an 1830s project eventually. And this would be great to have. It's also about my size too, which is really cool. I would never ever put this on though. Ever. It would die. Literally fall apart. So I hope you enjoyed seeing this bodice. I definitely wanted to do this video just to document it as it is now because it will be getting worse in the future. You know, it's not going to be getting better unless I do some treatment on it. So I hope you enjoyed this little tour through this bodice. If you would like to see more tours of my antique clothing collection, my sewing adventures, or more preservation tips and little tidbits about conservation, please follow along with me on YouTube here. You can click subscribe, on TikTok at Costume and Conservation, and on Instagram at Costume and Conservation. If you have any ideas for me about what to do with this bodice, please drop them down below. I would love to hear from you, especially if you are a conservator as well. And I just hope you have a fabulous day.